Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Merry Christmas on this, the third day of Christmas, I believe. It is December the 27th. It's a Friday. That makes it a friendly Friday, and we've got a special in-studio guest. My father is joining me. He's sitting right across the room, so we'll bring him on in just a moment. For those of you who are monitoring the chat, you'll see there is a C. Seraphin hanging out there, and Charlie will be with us momentarily. All right, so I got a whole host of things. It seems like the world lost its mind while we were all opening presents and hanging out. And some of the world lost its mind while drinking, it seems like. And maybe some people were even drinking on Navy ships, or they just didn't get trained up on how to use the technology properly. The question is everything an op? Are we all just being conned? Are we all being screwed around with? Are they just twisting our nipples? Is that what it is? Like an uncle that just had too much to drink? We're going to get into some really strange stuff. And every story I have, I feel like is weirder than the last, whether it's trolling from Donald Trump saying he's going to annex Panama or Greenland, or whether it's Elon Musk telling everybody that immigrants have to come in here because Americans are too stupid to do tech. We're going the whole gamut. And then, of course, out in the wide world of everything, there are things getting shot down. We are seeing the Koreans now on a second impeachment in 2 weeks of their second president. It's just a mess. But we'll see if alcohol has something to do with it too, because we're going to cover down on some of our absolute favorite leftist weirdos. Before we get deep into the drunk, which is where we're going, let's go ahead and say thanks to my friends over at Patriot Coolers. If you guys know, you know, patriotcoolers.com. If you need your white wine spritzer to stay cold, they're certainly a great option. Go to patriotcoolers.com, use the promo code KYLE, save yourself 10%. If you spend $50 or more, you're going to get free shipping, or you could do something a little bit more responsible in the morning. If you're not a day drinker, you could check out a coffee mug like this one. This is the 19 ounce. It's got a spill-proof lid, which I have tested. So have all of my friends. It turns out if you have kids, you are going to test it. I actually had a kind of a funny little moment the other day pushing a stroller with the new Major, which is their large, industrial size 40 ounce. It's got a big straw coming out of it. And my tiniest daughter, who is now almost at 18 months old, was pushing the stroller. I had the tumbler in the back of it, and she was drinking from it while walking and not impaling herself. It's a rigid straw. It's an outstanding product. Even the little kid can figure out how to use it. So if you guys are interested, check out my friends over at Patriot Coolers. And again, look in the show description. In the notes, you'll always find a link to the Kyle Seraphin collection, which is to say the Suspendables collection. You don't need to put any stickers on. You guys can just get started by having it pre-engraved from those folks. We really appreciate them. And let's get into it. Okay, guys, we're going to get into it with a panel discussion. It's the first time I've tried this thing out. We've got Steve Friend and my father, Charlie, sitting on the other side of the room. Gentlemen, welcome to our Friendly Friday.
Thank you. I did not have Purple Nurple as my bingo card reference for the Friday after Christmas, but good to see you. And good to see you, Mr. Seraphin.
Oh, I left him muted. Sorry, Dad.
There you go. Nice to see you, Steve.
Well, Steve, one of the memes that runs around, or like the sort of new comment that I keep seeing, is various different videos of guys walking from movie scenes, kind of cocky walking in, and it says me walking into the Christmas party realizing that I'm now the right-wing uncle that all the aunts are upset about. That's a thing now. That's where the Purple Nurple came from.
It's just called winning at that point, right? I can't wait for that. Unfortunately, I'm the only child who has children in my family, so I'll never get the chance to be like the vast right-wing conspiracy guy.
You can't radicalize the other people's kids. Yeah, I've been seeing that. So we have a kind of a small circle of folks that have been sending us Christmas cards, and all my friends seem to have kids, at least the ones that send Christmas cards. It's a good sorting hat, right? You get to realize who has kids and who doesn't, because if you don't have kids, you're probably not sending Christmas cards to everybody.
You know, the rector of my dormitory in college, Father V, he's actually a good follow on X.
Did you say rector?
Rector, yeah.
Okay.
He's like the boss priest. I went to allegedly Catholic university, and he made a comment during one of his homilies where he was talking about how the Christmas cards he was receiving from people who were members of his former congregation, they had pictures of dogs as their children, and he was saying how that was such a problem, how people were starting to view their fur babies as actual babies. And at the time, it's kind of like you're 18, 19 years old, and you're like rolling your eyes at it. But the more I've seen how that's impacted as things have gone on in the decade and a half since I was in that spot, saying that, yep, Father V nailed it. We don't have people who are interested in making people anymore when they can just put their Yorkie in a carriage and push it along. And maybe the Yorkie can figure out how to drink out of a Patriot cooler.
I want to go to the senior Seraphin here on this. Why is it, shameless plugs, why?
That's an image right there. I'm just looking for the Yorkie and the Patriot cooler.
It's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to set it very low. What happened between your generation and my generation that skipped out on making a next generation? Why is it starting to winnow?
I have no idea.
Well, you were around a bunch of people.
I mean, I've witnessed it as you have, and it's just as strange to me. I don't know what the odds are. I guess 33% of those people who are in the world today have decided to have children. I have 6 children, and 2 of my 6 children have children. So that's 33%. Right, Steve? You're the math guy here.
33.3, but close enough.
33.3, a little more than 33. Thank you.
He's not just the math guy, he's also the precision guy. So we can always count on Steve.
Pedantic jerk, yes.
Hey, we love that about him. Yeah, he's the guy.
All right.
But I don't know why. I mean, why don't people have kids? Why don't, let's do a survey. Why don't you have kids? Too selfish, too busy, too many things on television, 70-inch television. There you go.
You want to just get that out right now, Steve, so you can just get the folks. You guys don't understand
trouble,
this, but
aren't you? Yes.
Steve started by coming in hot, explaining how much he loves his wife.
I do love my wife, and the fact of the matter is that I appreciate her perspective on things. She's the gas pedal, and I'm the brakes in the financial relationship that we have. And unfortunately, I wasn't there yesterday, so there were no brakes on that vehicle when she came home with a 75-inch television to replace the one that burned out in our house. I know she did her homework. I know she made several trips back and forth between stores to find herself a deal. But when I unloaded that thing and it was larger than me, I thought maybe I shouldn't have checked out on this decision and been more involved. It is back to the garden, right? There's a reason that Eve ate of the fruit, because Adam is at fault. He wasn't there. He was too busy gaming, checking in on his fantasy football team. Same thing. I'm at fault.
Yeah, I think that is the answer, Kyle. I want to share that because if you remember, back in the day, they used to have blackouts, right? And they always said that a lot of babies were created during blackouts. New York had a rolling blackout, and then there were a lot of pregnancies that resulted in children 9 months later. And with today's technology and the improvements in technology, and you're carrying your computer with you in your pocket, there are no blackouts. You're never disconnected. You're never really alone. The telephone is on the nightstand. It's right there, ready for instant messaging. So there's really no time to either create or raise children. And so it's the technology. I think that's a good answer. Way to go, Steve. We got to it in a roundabout way.
That's a really awkward statement. Speaking of the children, let's lead off with this because she's in the news. And if anybody knows anything about Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker Emerita, I guess, of the House, we know that the thing that she joined politics was always about the children. It had nothing to do with enriching herself or her lust for power or drinking or whatever it is. From her own mouth, it was about children. And I just found this clip highly interesting at this time of year because there's always a drunken aunt telling you things that you can't believe at every family gathering. And here is America's drunken aunt telling us about the children.
It was necessary for me to run again because my goal was to make sure that what's-his-name never stepped foot in the White House again. And that was part of my mission for the children. I went from housewife to House member to House Speaker for the children. 1 in 5 in poverty, living in America and going to sleep hungry at night. They were my mission. In the Congress, they were my priority. Their health, their education, the economic security of their families, a safe environment, including safe from gun violence in which they could thrive, a world at peace in which they could reach their fulfillment, and our country could too, with them. So that was my mission. The difference between the visions of the Democrats for the people addressing their kitchen table issues and the other side is so vast that I'll have to put out my enjoyment of other things for a while until we get that job done.
Okay, and she's obviously decided to stop putting away her enjoyment and enjoyed some things. And she was in, I think, Luxembourg, and allegedly lost her footing on a marble staircase, fell while on a congressional trip for no particular reason, and had to be flown back to the United States to have emergency hip surgery. The explanation is actually quite simple. There's nothing nefarious. There's certainly not a martini involved. The explanation is her spokesperson, a guy named... I'm sorry, that wasn't her spokesperson. This is Representative Michael McCall from Texas. Not a spokesperson at all. Wrote, quote, "She likes to wear high heels. Very high. She was on one of her last steps on this marble staircase that didn't have a railing. It's obviously the fault of the stairs and the railing lacking. She lost her footing and she fell to the ground. But now she'll get a new hip out of the deal." That's the story. Gentlemen, Dad, you've met Nancy before.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, housewife. She was on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in the 1970s. She was very much involved in politics. So when did she have time to be a housewife? Maybe she had a full career as a housewife and raised adult children before 1974. So let's see, that would make her 22 in 74. You do the math. Steve, I'm going to count on you for that. But wow, she's older than she says, if that's true. Yeah. No, false. And
Steve, what about the double eyebrows? Were those real eyebrows or was that AI?
I think that's just the fact that these people have no soul and they've sold their souls for power and all the accoutrements behind it. It manifests itself later in life, which is why you see the inside coming to the outside. It's after all the collagen has left them, and there's no amounts of surgery that they can do to hide that fact. Those are legit, the double eyebrow looks. That's just a shadow from her caved eyeballs. And she talks about giving away up on the more comfortable things in life. The $25,000 refrigerator that she has in her house with all like the $15 a carton ice cream. Yeah, she's really like slumming it for the people. It's for the children, don't you know?
It's for the children. She's not my favorite drunk person in Congress. We actually had someone else who used to be in Congress, now is sitting over at the Naval Observatory for the last couple days. And I didn't realize how multicultural this country really was until I started learning a little bit about Kwanzaa and some of the most important principles. This is not a gag. This is a real video that was really taped by a real person who really ran for president in this country and we're told was this close. And every bit of that is shocking. Again, let's go to America's second favorite drunk auntie because she also has no children of her own. She's not running for the children per se. She's running for that principle of Chakawakala or whatever it's called. Stand by for Kamala. We narrowly dodged this bullet, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, my sister and I, we grew up celebrating Kwanzaa. Every year, our family and our extended family, we would gather around across multiple generations, and we'd tell stories. The kids would sit on the carpet, and the elders would sit in chairs, and we would light the candles, and of course, afterwards, have a beautiful meal. And of course, there was always the discussion of the 7 principles. And my favorite, I have to tell you, was always the one about self-determination, Kujichagulia. And, you know, essentially it's about be and do. Be the person you want to be and do the things you want to do and do the things that need to be done. It's about not letting anyone write our future for us, but instead going out and writing it for ourselves. And that principle motivates me today as we seek to confront the challenges facing our country and to build a brighter future for all Americans. So.
All right, that was Kuji Tagalia. Can you just address your thoughts on that one there, Dad?
It was always my favorite principal as well.
Do you remember any of the other 7 out of curiosity? Does she?
The rest of them, they slipped my memory, but I don't know why. But I was alive and well when,
I found all of them.
When Kwanzaa was invented, so I know that. And I believe it was invented in the East Bay when I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I was close to the creation of Kwanzaa. That's sort of like almost being in Bethlehem, back 2,000 years ago.
It's very similar. Kwanzaa was created in 1966, so that would have put you, I think, in high school.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought it was in the 70s. 66?
It didn't really take on because most people couldn't pronounce the 7 principles. Steve, I'm going to give you some of the principles, which I've pulled up here on the screen. 7 principles of Kwanzaa are Umoja. Please correct me in the comments if I didn't get that. That's the principle of unity. Kuji Kamalia, the self-determination, which is obviously, which is Kamala's favorite. Ujima, that's collective work and responsibility, sounds very Marxist, coming from a Marxist professor of Africana Studies and activist author, a person named Ronald McKinley Everest, but he changed his name to Dr. Malajanana Karenja. Totally irrelevant. The easiest principle to remember is Nia, which is interesting that Kamala didn't choose that one. That's purpose. You could see that being a thing. She doesn't choose Kuumba, which is creativity, Imani, which is faith, and Ujamaa, which is cooperative economics, also known as socialism. So anyway, this is fun. And I like to know that holidays that were created were also celebrated by the so-called Christian, the maybe Hindu, not really clear religious situation of the Kamala Harris, the cultural chameleon that pops up. Do you have a favorite principle that I've just read to you?
I'm going to go back to the Kuji Kamalia because it just reminds me of them thinking like, that sounds like, could you, Kamala, answer this question? Because that was early enough in the administration where they thought that she could actually string a thought together. And then she started doing the word salad, the be and the do. And Joe Biden, guess what, by the way, he needed to have somebody who just had who was more black. So they were like, hey, Kuji Kamala, could you go after the Kuji Kamalia and be more black for us? And she went out there and crapped the bed like she always does.
You just Joe Biden'd and gave me the combination of the Dana Carvey, which is fantastic. Really, really, really well done.
Yeah, I like to crap the bed myself, but
Joe Biden does that. Joe Biden does that all the time. Guess what? By the way.
Yeah, he has. That's all very upsetting. Thank you for sharing all of those horrible images for me. I want to go ahead and kick into the op that has been going on. Steve, have you been paying attention to Twitter when you should have been paying attention to your new big screen TV and your family?
The TV hasn't been wired up yet, so I was staring at the computer in my pocket nonstop. All I care about is the X's.
Do you know about the right-wing warfare, tech bros versus MAGA? Are you ready?
I'm very, very familiar with this and very... if they're buying it, selling it, I'm just a hold because I don't care. But yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so here's the story, folks, because Newsweek covered this, which means that this is the op that's going on right now. Right-wing warfare. It's pitting big tech against the MAGA people over H-1B visas. All right. And if you're not familiar with this because you have been doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, which is focusing on family and Kuji Kamalia over the Kwanzaa/Christmas holiday, this story is fantastically written. Sometimes they just really nail it. MAGA evangelists like Laura Loomer believe that Elon Musk's influence within Trump's circle serves his own interest. Coming from someone like Laura Loomer, that's pretty incredible. That's actually one of the funniest things that you will ever hear. Loomer has singled out Elon Musk and his tech allies, including Box CEO Aaron Levy and PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel and some others, saying that the Doge initiative for government efficiency is actually just cover for sending funds into Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and that they are going to hire more Indian people under the H-1B visa program. There's this big breakout here, and we're seeing this aggressive push to fight about immigration. Everything about this suggests to me an algorithmically driven op to promote discord. This is that apple of discord thrown in there to the fairest. It's like, how about good immigration? Ready, go. And then you saw people break along ideological lines. What do you see happening there, Steve?
That's exactly what my assessment is exactly yours. Look, it's a distraction to get away from what's honestly going to be necessary to happen beginning in January 20th. And that's going to be marching abuelas down to the border, entire families, and all the sob stories they're going to be thrown at us by the legacy media, where they're going to say, do you want 90-year-old abuela separated from her family because she doesn't have health insurance, or her granddaughter's working 3 minimum wage jobs in order to support her? And that sob story is already written, and they're going to pull on heartstrings. And on top of that, they're trying to fracture the MAGA movement or wing for what they can about it, so that they can paint it as racist. Look, Vivek Ramaswamy can say whatever he wants. He's not in a position of power or authority. He wasn't elected to anything. You could actually sit on the fence on this one. Both sides can make points. You can say, hey, we appreciate culture, and it's an issue of, are you willing to assimilate? Are you willing to work hard? Are you smart? Are you capable? Can you make our society better and then melt into the melting pot? And that's a good thing. And you can say, hey, look, we have an obligation as a country that we should look out for our own. There's been a net loss of jobs for native-born Americans. Those are all legitimate things to point out. You don't have to pick a tribe in this one. And certainly when you have Laura Loomer saying, like, I am the MAGA, like the Anthony Fauci, I am the science, it's just not worth engaging in the entire debate. Because I'm more interested in, let's get rid of the people who murder people like Laken Riley from our society, rather than does Elon Musk or any of those other tech bros have enough coders?
Charlie, do you have any instinct as to, is this a historical thing that the political right pushes back against immigration? Is this a left or right issue? This is an America issue? Where does that live?
I didn't think so until just a couple of seconds ago, but then I figured it out. We need to have virtual immigration, because in the digital realm, there are no limits, right? So why do people physically have to come? They don't have to go to the office to do work. Why do they have to come to the country to do work? So why don't we just virtually import any of the great technicians that we want in the high-tech industry and let them work from home in their hut, wherever it may be?
Do they have internet in their hut?
Well, let's get them internet. Let's get them Skylink. There we go.
Starlink.
We've solved all the problems, and we don't have to feed them or house them. But it seems to me that would work.
Skylink is the Chinese bootleg version of Starlink, I think. So I think that's actually okay, too. They can have that as well.
We're talking India, so they're closer.
They are closer. Okay, so interestingly enough, this is professional level commentary. This could have made it on CNN. You guys are going to be shocked to find out that this is essentially the same discussion that was being had by Caitlin Collins, who doesn't appear to be an op at all and is totally not excited to try to drive these wedges in between the Vivek, the Elon, the Donald Trump, and the MAGA, aka Laura Loomer, who is apparently like a Palpatine character. She puts on the cloak of MAGA and discerns what is and what is not. Here we go.
I'm not against legal immigration. I think most individuals who voted for Trump aren't necessarily against legal immigration as it pertains to H-1B. But Americans didn't vote for Vivek Ramaswamy. They didn't vote for Elon Musk. They voted for Donald Trump in part because of his tough stance on immigration illegally, but also because I assume they believe that the president-elect wouldn't increase the number of individuals coming into the country, even legally, that could potentially negatively impact or disproportionately affect Americans as it pertains to certain types of jobs. And so, again, I go back to my original premise. We need to focus on domestic skill development. I understand what former Mayor de Blasio was saying. We got to bring people in with the goal of getting to that point, maybe in the decade or so. I get that. But why not limit the cap where it's at and focus over the next decade of increasing skills within our own people? Most Americans don't want to see good paying American jobs going to people from India or China.
Yeah, but wait a minute. The competition, the global competition is happening right now. And if we don't grab that talent, sure, Michael, I hear you. But if you don't grab the talent now, someone else does. And if you really want to grow the economy so you'll have that opportunity for Americans, why would you leave talent on the table? You know, grab what you can now and build toward the goal you're talking about. It's not either or.
That was Mayor de Blasio telling us, I can't take him seriously after watching the COVID videos, since we're talking about ops, when he was really excited about getting a shot because he might also get a burger and are you telling him that he could get this delicious burger and French fries That all will always haunt me. I think some of these people sold their credibility cheap when they did, and now they will always have to deal with that. So we'll go back and kind of address that, because it turns out the COVID origin story is back in the news and we can't hide from it. So we're going to just embrace it. Before we do, let's go ahead and say thanks to my buddies over at Patriot Mobile. Folks, just like the rest of us, Americans across the country are getting tired. They are frustrated by the stalling economy, inflation, endless wars, relentless assaults on the values. That seems to be a big one. Thankfully, there are companies like Patriot Mobile that still believe in America and the Constitution and our principles. And I'm proud to partner with Patriot Mobile because they are on the front lines fighting for the First and the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, our military and our first responder heroes. You can take a stand for conservative causes. You can put America first, just like Laura Loomer, if you want. And you can switch to Patriot Mobile today. You'll get the same nationwide coverage as all the big providers because they operate on all the same 3 major networks. They also back their service with a coverage guarantee and 100% US-based customer service, not Indian, which is a big deal. And you'll find that you can get the best plan for your needs. If you want to call them, you can do so at 972-PATRIOT. You can also go to patriotmobile.com and use patriotmobile.com/KSS. You can keep your number. You can keep your phone. You can upgrade. Just use that promo code KSS. It's different than the other ones we use. Right now, you can get a free month of service when you use the offer code KSS. And don't get fooled by other providers that are pretending to share values, pretending to have the same coverage when they don't and they can't. You can join us. You can switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile network provider, Patriot Mobile. Again, it's patriotmobile.com/KSS for a free month of service today. All right. So the question then, why do we all distrust these people? Maybe because they were lying from the beginning. Steve, hold your horses on this one, because this is coming out of the Daily Caller today. This was put out day before yesterday when we were not on the air. The intelligence blob, that's a little homage to Mike Benz, who uses that kind of term. It's the intelligence apparatus, which includes parts of big tech, includes government, includes non-governmental agencies and all these groups that sort of fund the movement, the intel op. They've boxed out the lab leak proponents and they sold it to Biden as he was mentally fading in favor of the national origins theory, the natural origins theory being that it came out of a wet market or that it jumped from one species to another. I'm going to tell you this because they're talking this about bird flu right now. The federal agencies and scientists suspecting that COVID-19 began with a laboratory leak in China were boxed out of key presidential briefings, and their reporting was not allowed to make it up to the White House. That's just it. The FBI was the only intelligence agency that had a moderate confidence in the lab leak theory, but the agency was not invited to a key August 2021 briefing with Joe Biden. This is the thing that I have a problem with, gentlemen. It seemed really obvious right away that this was the case. We all had friends in various places that were saying it, whether they had a position or just using their own sort of, scrutinizing powers. There was never really a chance that somebody had eaten a bat and then it somehow had made it to Seattle. That just didn't make any sense. Steve, were you hearing rumblings when you were working for the Bureau about this sort of lab leak situation, or was it just, where'd you hear it?
I just heard it from consuming content. I mean, I was in a pretty remote location, but nothing ever made sense about the wet market to me. I mean, the premise was that a bat that nested 600 miles away somehow flew that distance and then gnawed on a pangolin, which vomited into a stew, which made its way into somebody's mouth. When there was a bioweapons lab that's in that town and it's run by a guy who's in charge of bioweapons for the Chinese Communist Party, I mean, let's just use some common sense here. I mean, and even just to throw it back to the last clip that you played, this is why we don't trust anybody, because Bill de Blasio was named Warren Wilhelm until he turned 40 years old and he realized that sounded like it was too waspy. So he changed his name from Warren Wilhelm to Bill de Blasio, because everybody can vote for just Bill de Blasio. He sounds like he's from New York City, right? Not Connecticut, like Bill de Blasio is really from. There's nobody worth trusting in this. And we saw everything that was related to coronavirus, even changing the name to COVID. Coronavirus was changed to COVID over a weekend because they said that it was potentially racist against Latinx people because corona or something, when that's Latin. There was nothing about it that was authentic the entire time. And that includes up to today, where people are still working from home.
We're going to talk more about that because apparently some of them are going to have to come back to work in the office. And I've got that for our last story. Dad, you got censored because you did a radio show during the COVID time and you guys were uploading. Will you tell that story? Because I'm not sure everyone is aware of.
So, doing a local radio show in Payson, Arizona, with a population of 16,000 and a listenership of 600, I said that we were using the online resources of YouTube to catalog the stories, so the shows. So every day they would put the recording and they would store it on YouTube because we didn't have the capacity at the radio station. Anyway, it got censored and they took us down because I said I thought it was really stupid to try to make young children wear masks. It just didn't seem to serve any purpose. And that came back and it was stamped with large letters across the screen, medical misinformation. And that was the end of the...
And that was your opinion. That wasn't like you weren't making a proclamation, correct?
No, but as a parent, someone who's been around children, and a grandparent, someone who's been around children, trying to put a mask on a toddler, common sense, try to put a sweater over the head of a young child sometimes is the same thing. So it was just dumb. It was stupid. But to your original question, I thought my gut reaction to all of this whole bat theory, and I didn't know about the vomiting in the stew. That's new.
That's
to me,
actually pretty good stuff.
New information. Yeah. It just always was illogical. That didn't make sense. But a biological weapons lab in China, that made sense. That seemed to fit with the common knowledge. So, yeah, I was there.
The goofy thing was, too, is that there were people inside the agency. And, of course, at that time, I was based out of D.C., and so there were people talking about it in the various offices because it is actually the work of the intelligence agencies to go out there and do that. But then they started pushing it. And we had a CIA whistleblower come forward who is now back with the agency, luckily, but worked with Feds for Medical Freedom. And I'm not going to say his name, but you guys can find him if you want. It's available. It's just I don't need to out him at the moment. Went to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and said, not only did the analysts pretty conclusively decide like the most compelling story is the thing that every American assumed that was being logical about it, including people like Jon Stewart, who basically had the same story about your vomiting in the stew and the pangolin. He's like, there's no way that you can convince me that this huge chain of events took place when it's so easy that someone walked out of a lab and either made a mistake. And I don't think it was necessarily intentional. That's the funny thing about the Chinese. And this is what we're going to be kind of talking about. They don't need to have an intentional leak to be able to take advantage of a situation because they have lots of very long-term plans and they think about things methodically and they have, 50 and 100-year plans on what they want to go do. And if something fits into the plan, then they just enact it. But amazingly, that got you kicked off social media. For those of you who are doing that, it got you kicked out of polite conversations if you were on the wrong side of it. And it got you a bonus if you lied about it, which is what essentially was done with the folks in the agency. Those analysts that were willing to go along with the story got bonuses. And some other people also got paid off, it seemed like. We haven't heard a lot of talk about Anthony Fauci in a while. Steve, what do you think Anthony Fauci's up to right now?
He's actually a professor at Georgetown, and he has a protective detail provided to him by the United States Marshal Service. The United States Marshal Service has spent $15 million over the last 18 months protecting Anthony Fauci. So he's a good and faithful servant by the regime because what they do in the regime is reward their friends and punish their enemies. He gave 40 years, and he's going to receive way more than his 30 pieces of silver. Unless there's some sort of accountability here. And I don't think there's going to be. Other than the viral clips of Rand Paul saying that you're a liar, I don't know what we're going to get out of this. He deserves to be at the end of an L-shaped hallway in solitary confinement somewhere in Leavenworth, but I think he'll probably just live out the rest of his days, even though he knows better than all of us because he is the science, that he doesn't really have a biblical worldview, that when it all fades to black, he'll just be fine.
I want to actually see the dollar comparison between what they've spent on the security detail for Donald Trump and the one that was spent on Anthony Fauci, since one of them has had assassination attempts and one of them is just an a-hole. Here is kind of a compilation of why you need a security detail. Maybe significant lying for a significant period of time that affected people like you and me, and probably certainly all three of us had some effect. And I think a lot of our listeners probably experienced it as well. Just a little walk down memory lane here. not the L-shaped hallway where he belongs.
So now we have 2 vaccines that are really quite effective. The mRNA vaccine, highly effective, extraordinarily efficacious, 94 to 95% for mild to moderate disease, and virtually 100% efficacious, because the real-world effectiveness is even more impressive than the results of the clinical trial.
All right, and it goes on and on. I'll actually post this over on the Locals channel for you guys to watch that if you've never seen the headline montage, which is actually fairly compelling, and it goes on for about 3.5 minutes, and it's all of the things talking about the effectiveness and the efficaciousness and whatever the heck that word means. Did we ever get a real definition of what that word means in real life? Do you have a grasp of that, Dad?
I think it's spelled with an A, not an E.
Affectatious?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It affects people.
Steve,
it's 100% effective.
Affective.
It's effective at raising the bottom line, making sure that Pfizer makes record profits. And I need to amend, I was corrected by your chat here on the Kyle Seraphin Show. The marshals quietly dropped the protective detail for Anthony Fauci last week. He's now getting private security. So,
are we paying for that?
That's an excellent question.
Well, we've already paid for it, if you think about it, because he never was able to disclose the honorariums that he received for being science.
Right.
Literally representing
all of science.
The science became man, and Anthony Fauci was it.
That's kind of wild. Yeah, how? Okay. I'm troubled by that. The reason why I'm troubled and the reason why I bring this stuff up is not because I just want to run down memory lane, although we do have a fun little tip. This is another little piece of that affectatious. It was 100% either affective or effective at something, but it's not really clear what that something was. So I want to kind of get another little taste. By the way, these are the tickers, Dad, that you talked about, the death tickers that allowed most of us to see through the op. And I want you guys, if you're watching this, to pay attention to the right side of the screen while they're discussing it. They're going to have a panel. They're going to talk about some incredible numbers of things that you better do. And then they're going to have a death ticker like the national debt clock that was telling you exactly how many people died because probably because Donald Trump. It was his fault. Again, pay attention to the right side of the screen.
We do have some breaking news. Drug maker Pfizer just announcing the results of its vaccine trial for adolescents. It says its coronavirus shot was 100% effective at preventing infection and sickness among 12 to 15-year-olds. This could be a major game changer for reopening schools across America. So joining us now is Dr. Chris Purnell. She's a public health physician and fellow at the American College of Preventive Medicine. Dr. Purnell, great to see you. 100% effective? Is that, John and I haven't heard numbers like that. Is that unusual to find that efficacy rate?
Well, that's even higher than what we were reported when we had 95% efficacy in adults. Look, we know these mRNA vaccines are a game changer. The technology is different. The technology is very promising.
It's 100%. It does not get any better.
Guys, it doesn't get any better. 95 is not even 100, and 100 is bigger.
We have to explain that 100 is bigger than 95.
998.
Meanwhile, trust the numbers we have in the corner there. To me, the ultimate where it was all contrived, and it was pretty clear that it was from the very beginning. But I don't know if you remember, there were the daily press briefings that Donald Trump was doing, and he was having Anthony Fauci and Debbie Birx go out there with her bedazzled face mask. And the question went out, it was very circulated amongst the media, that we had just surpassed the death total from Vietnam. And every single media person out there was, now today we have crossed over the threshold. The death toll here is worse than Vietnam. And I'm like, this is completely artificial and fake. And you don't have any of the data. It's impossible that you could have gotten it. I work with people in the government. They take sick leave and annual leave and just leave, and they've been told to stay out of the office. This is impossible that you would have gotten any of this information. There's no uniformity. There's no system in place to do this. You're making up these numbers, and it's being done because you have this unique opportunity now to both spike the president in his last year in the run-up to the re-election attempt, and to boost your own ratings, because we're in an interesting time, and I've talked about it before, where we had really good and comfortable lives, and it sounded really kind of interesting to rev the engine on that fear. Let's go pretend to live in the zombie apocalypse for 2 weeks or a month or 4 years to flatten the economy.
It's, I missed it before, but I just saw it when you put that screenshot up there, the last one. When you're trying to sell something, you never say it's $10, right? You say it's $9.98 or $9.99. That's a selling technique. And the number up on the screen was $550,998. Okay? So it's just like, wow,
so
what
many
a deal. It could have been 551,000 rounded out, but that obviously wouldn't have resonated the same way. People would have looked at that and went, well, that might not be a real number.
That seems like an estimate.
You put $9.98, you're right on. It
looks like the price of a TV.
Yeah, there you go.
And you need that TV. Okay, let me add to that, because I had this really interesting little chat. It was a throwaway conversation with a gal who was stocking shelves at the Natural Grocer yesterday, because my wife and I went and bought toothpaste there. I don't know why I need $9 toothpaste, but I do need $9 toothpaste apparently. This is not my choice, Steve. My wife gets that. She's a luxury item chooser, and her thing is potions.
We need to hack into that signal chat between the Suspendables wives. It's a conspiracy.
Well, if you start getting $9 toothpaste, then you'll know what's going on. I got the $7 toothpaste, which was the budget version of it, and it still tastes exactly like baking soda. So I don't understand what I got. But what I did notice is on the door, in reference to what Charlie just said and this selling technique, they have hours in that store. They start at I think they start at 7:38. And they close at 8:36 p.m. Have you ever seen this? Because this is real. I'm not making this up. Anybody who lives near a natural grocer, it doesn't matter if you live near a natural grocer, look up natural grocer on your Google Maps and go look at the hours of the store, and you'll see that it closes at 8:36 p.m. or 7:36 p.m. depending on the time of year. And so I asked the lady, and my wife is like, don't ask her, she's not going to know. And I'm like, oh, I guarantee you, because that's the first question I've got. What are the hours that I'm working, right? And why is it 8:36 p.m. when we close? What the shit is that about? Because that's a really weird number. And she said that people, when the original store opened up, they always wanted to come in after the hours. They were still in the store and they needed a few more minutes. And the woman who did it basically decided to do a hard fudge. So it's kind of like the old hours in a bar that used to be we're open till closing. If you've never done that, I used to run a bar and they're like, hey, how long are you guys open tonight? And I said, till we close, which is always true. That's the easy thing to do. And it's like, until the business basically dries up, you might as well be open because you're still turning a profit. And so for whatever reason, they opened at this time. It was like till 8:30, but people would want a few more minutes in the store. So she made it a weird number so that no one really knew when 8:36 was. And it's the same thing I've used previously when I want to screw with people and they say, hey, how long is it going to be till you get there? And I say, I'll be there in 17 minutes. Nobody has a concept in their head of what 17 minutes is, but they do have a concept of 15 minutes and 10 minutes and 20 minutes. So if you give them that rounded number where they're used to it, they're going to look and they'll be like, dude, it's been more than 10 minutes. Where are you? But if you say 17, no one's going to do the math and figure out what that looks like. So they'll be like, oh, or you'd be like, I'll be there in 12 minutes. I'll be there in 8.5 minutes. That will get you a lot of extra time. And that's the wiggle room. And they were using that stuff on CNN's website, like in real time to the American people. And some of us who are kind of like natural fibbers and like to push this envelope, we saw it. And my dad is one, and you are one, and I am one. And that's probably why we all get along. But how many Americans just bought this hook, line, and sinker? How many people walk by that store that see 8:36 closing time and never once asked that question?
All of them. Just about all of them.
Most.
I mean, we all have the stories that we saw the absurdity where things made no sense. I mean, look, it was at the time where they started doing, and then they enhanced it because of the social distancing rules, which were completely arbitrary and capricious. The definition of tyranny. The online groceries where you could buy and then just go and get the pickup, and it was convenient, and the weather was crummy in Iowa, so it made sense at the time. That's what I changed. I amended. I said, there's no question, no way I'm ever doing online pickup. I am walking into that store and I'm walking the wrong way down the one-way aisles because people need to know that this is stupid. And I saw people who were shielding their children, putting their bodies in the way of me as I walked the wrong way.
You were walking the wrong way. You were walking up the down.
Guys who had, the sleeve tattoos and the Don't Tread on Me t-shirts, 33-inch pythons because they're Rogan bros who had double masks on. And the American people were weighed, measured, and found wanting, but for the most part, which is why I have no confidence that another emergency will not come around and people will just line up.
I think you're probably right. So do my friends over at the Wellness Company. So thanks for the segue there. We're going to just go right to it. Folks, Anish Kumar Jha, he's a former Joe Biden administration COVID-19 response coordinator, recently gave a chilling speech at the University of Michigan, the School of Public Health. He warned of a new age of pandemics fueled by bioweapon development and natural threats. He called for a massive investment in vaccines against pathogens that don't even exist yet, and encouraged a war on so-called misinformation. That's probably us, if we're being honest. The question we need to ask is who's working on bioweapons? How many labs are out there globally? And who's going to send them our way? Yes, Donald Trump got the win, but evil is still lurking in the background, and being prepared is still your best defense. The Wellness Company Contagion Emergency Kit, engineered by Dr. Peter McCullough, one of the voices of truth in the last few years, and his medical board. They include 5 critical life-saving medications like ivermectin, Tamiflu, a nebulizer, hydroxychloroquine, something every household can have access to now, which won't be nearly as hard, and it cuts through the red tape. It's very simple. You just have to fill out a digital intake form. Your kit will arrive at your door in 1 to 2 weeks. Do not wait until our friends in the government have decided to put these plans into action. Just stay ready. Expect the unexpected. And you can do so by heading to twc.health/Kyle. Again, that's TWC for the Wellness Company .health/Kyle, K-Y-L-E. Use the promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E, to save yourself $32 off. Plus, you'll get free shipping over there. Again, twc.health/Kyle. It is timely to have these kind of conversations, I feel like. It is something that is continually on the radar, and we're not done with it yet. For whatever reason, we're not done because there's a bird flu, you guys, and you probably knew this. We're done with bats. We've moved on to birds. It still has wings, and it looks like this. This is the story. There's a virus that was found. It's the variant of the Louisiana bird flu, and a bird flu patient in Louisiana that is showing a mutation that could, emphasis on could, I'm sure they didn't emphasize it, increase transmissibility to humans. CDC analysis finds. I read the story for you. It turns out that the H5N1 bird flu, which we've been told over and over that these bird flus are going to be more potent, more transmissible, and coming after us. But number one, the best part of this entire story is in the first line of the story, Steve Friend. It says, but there's no evidence the virus has been passed to anyone else. The patient was infected from sick and dead birds in a backyard flock. The CDC found out through some analysis, found out that a dude who liked to play with dead birds in the backyard got sick from dead birds, but nobody else has.
Is that like a militia violent extremist group with a low propensity for violence, i.e. 0, because 0 is a really low number? But it
could be violent if the right situation happened. Yeah, I think so. I think it's what it is.
The CDC has no credibility left at this point.
They don't know that yet, though. That's why this is interesting to watch. That's what this. That's the most interesting thing about this is that this hand got overplayed, I think, and that's why everything looks like an op. The problem is that there is still plenty of people that have done Route B. I tell you guys, I feel like this is true, and I'll get your reflection individually. But it seems like people had 2 choices during the COVID. One of them was question everybody, the sort of X-Files, trust no one. And the second one is everybody is lying, so I'm just going to believe whatever the hell I want. And that's my favorite new theory. And that's why the Earth is flat and the moon is made out of cheese. That is also a flashlight. And nothing that I've been told is real because I just live in my own fantasy world. Gravity is fake. Those people, they're the ones that are kind of like the most likely to now be taken in by God knows what. Birds aren't real. The CIA controls them all. Go.
I share that sentiment. I think you had the opportunity to be skeptical and to do your own homework on things and take everything with a healthy grain of cynicism and check the sources of it. Or you could do what the latter group is, and that is they said, you lied to me, so I'm going to assume you lied to me about everything. And I think it's even more directive than that. I'm going to assume the opposite of whatever you told me is true. It's not even like we're going to, whatever I want to be true, like even fantastical things like, oh, gravity doesn't work. I don't feel pulled down. I feel more pressed down from above, something absurd. It's that, oh, well, you told me the Earth is round and I've seen globes in school. Ergo, it has to be the opposite of that. It has to be flat.
Dad, did people doubt the moon landing when Neil Armstrong was doing the famous broadcast?
I don't think so. That came on later. the movie, I think, had a lot to do with that. They made a movie about the faking the moon landing, but I think that people were enthralled at that time. We were on the verge of a new era of discovery, and we've always, talked about going beyond the limits of the atmosphere, and it was a really exciting time. I think 1969 June, landing on the moon. Yeah, that was cool. I announced that on a radio station in Madison, Wisconsin. Got to play the audio tape from, One Small Step, and it was good. I think it was a good time. I'm still back to the guy. I think people will, as long as people will play with sick birds in the backyard, people will believe anything. I think that's the connection.
There was a video that I saw, and this has nothing to do with anything, but it was, are there fire-breathing dead chickens in India? And somehow somebody either pulled a gas inhalant into the lungs of dead chicken and had an ignition source underneath, or something similar to that. I don't exactly know what happened here, Steve, but I did see the video, and the guy was squeezing out. If you squeeze a dead bird, the lungs will inflate just because of the way that their chest cavity works, and then they'll exhale. I knew a friend who'd play dead ducks. He would try to make a tune out of them. He'd arrange them. He was a musical mind, so he would go shoot ducks in a pond, pull them out, and then he would play the ducks, and you could set up a couple of different notes because they all squawk at different levels. And somebody was doing it with chicken. Yeah, you know this guy, by the way. Yeah, that's someone you know.
Yeah.
So they were doing it with these chickens, and it was fire was coming out of the nostrils of the dead chicken. And they were like, what's going on? Are these, and people would be like, oh my God. And it's well, you got a lot of things out of camera here. It's just showing the face of the dead chicken and not anything else. Who knows if there's a guy with a name in flame underneath it or whatever. But yeah, if you're going to play with dead birds, it's a possibility you end up with a bird flu. I think it's probably real. We used to be a little bit more serious and a little bit less of this viral clicking. I got a really fun video of a wild human being that somehow made it to be president as well. I think a lot of comparisons have been driven Donald Trump and Reagan. And they're not the same kind of person. Reagan was a really, really good speaker, and he delivered messages really well. He was really inspirational. I don't think Donald Trump has that talent in the same way, but they're talking about a lot of the same things, like crushing working men and just obvious common sense things, and with an understanding of business. For an actor, which is where he came out of, this is 1975, so 6 years after our lunar landing story. And I think it still rings true today. You could run for president on this today, and people would want to elect you if you were getting people to listen.
When you and I were boys back in the Midwest,
right,
governments, federal, state, and local, were only taking about 15 cents out of every dollar earned. Today, they're taking almost half of every dollar earned in the United States. And most people don't realize it because the taxes are hidden in the so-called business taxes. The politician that stands up and yells, oh, let's save the little man, let's tax business, and everybody yells hooray. But they haven't figured out that every tax on business is just a part of the cost of production. And the customer winds up paying it when he buys the product. It's a hidden sales tax. There's 116 of them in the suit of clothes that each one of us is wearing.
Suppose a lot of economists have suggested, and I don't know that it'll ever come to be in this country, that if they closed all of the loopholes and corporations, and maybe tax loopholes, and even on the rich certain loopholes, and made a percentage income and made a flat fee without all of the deductions, that the government might raise as much money as they do now.
Oh, sure. And really, the loopholes, this has been overdone by the politicians, too.
No.
The bulk of the money that is taken by what are called loopholes are the legitimate deductions with which, if the people didn't have them, they couldn't pay their income tax. Interest on their mortgage, interest on the installments on their car, their property taxes on their home, if they have one, and so forth. These are, in politicians' eyes, loopholes. But we ought to have tax reform, and we ought to start by making it so simple that you don't have to hire a lawyer to find out how much you owe every year.
That's for sure. It used to be a little simplified, but not anymore.
Johnny, we live in the only country in the world where it takes more brains to figure out your income tax than it does to earn the income.
What a great line.
He's the GOAT, man. And that's a serious intellectual conversation happening on a nighttime comedy show. It's Johnny Carson. And Ronald Reagan, he was an actor. He was also in charge of the Screen Actors Guild Union. So he was involved with politics in that regard. He was an employee. He was a spokesperson for GM. He was a serious thinker who had come around to these issues and put a lot of thought into them, had talked about it for a long period of time before he eventually ran for governor of California. But I mean, how far are we from that, where you contrast that image where, you have Reagan, who at that point had not been elected president. He wound up losing the nomination in 76, but he was definitely on a short list of candidates to be in that position. And then you flash forward to 2020 or 2021, where you have Stephen Colbert doing a dance with vaccine marionette puppets or mascots. I mean, like, that's just a completely different time. I want to live in that country.
I do too. You want to find something? This is an interesting tie-in. Are you guys ready for this? Because they were making suggestions about what is now being called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. That was actually part of what Reagan was talking about in that clip. And I'm going to go back to it, and I'm going to play something that Rand Paul has made a career out of, talking about government waste and inefficiency. But this is also, it's just the common sense party that we kind of are losing, or we've lost. And it's been a theme for, what is that, 30 years now? And I'm sorry, 50 years? Is that 50 years that we're talking? Is that right? Do the math on it.
49.
Yeah, 40, yeah, there you go. Here we go. Watch this.
You're right. We've gotten in the habit over the last 40 years of thinking that government has the answers. There's very little that government can do as efficiently and as economically as the people can do themselves. And if government would shut the doors and sneak away for about 3 weeks, we'd never miss them. Our biggest problem is that we have built a permanent structure of government, federal, state, and local. The permanent employees, and they've come to the place that they actually determine policy in this country more than does the Congress of the United States. Mm-hmm. There are 14.5 million public employees in the United States. That's quite a voting bloc. And the bureaus and agencies, now in Washington, I heard you talking earlier about some of the research programs. Mm-hmm. What would you say if I told you about a study in which this was called the demography of happiness? And in this study, the government found out that young people are happier than old people. And they found out that people that earn more are happier than people that earn less. And they found out that well people are happier than sick people.
That's good. Well,
this was $249,000 to find out it's better to be rich, young, and healthy than old, poor, and sick.
What do you think about that one, Dad?
Yeah, it's funny because I saw that clip online yesterday or the day before too. So it was it's really powerful. And what you've been saying all along is shut the government down and no one will notice. The other point, Steve, I'd make about Reagan is that he studied economics in college, and he was an economist. I mean, he really did have a good sense of what was going on. And the movie career, a lot of times people with other skill sets get into a side business that can earn a lot of money for them, and he did that. But his position in the union and his position later in politics as governor and as president was predicated on a base of knowledge that he had and a philosophy that he had that was consistent. So he didn't just wake up one day and start talking about things that he didn't know about. There were things that he had considered seriously for a very long time in his life before he became a public figure. And that's kind of lost. You don't see too many of those. You see a few. Tom Massey always comes to mind because there are contemporary people who have that intelligence and educational background to justify their positions on different things, but most politicians today are just blowing in the wind, and whatever, if it's dancing with the COVID vaccine puppets, then so be it.
I have this instinct that's more evidence that the so-called op. The op is just basically that there's a status quo and we're all sort of just playing along. You don't get to really move permanent Washington. It's just been growing slowly. It's been growing since 1975. It was growing 40 years before that, if you listen to what Reagan's talking about. And now here we are 50 years after that conversation, and we're having the same thing. So that's 100 years of growth, which goes back exactly to the thing I've said, that the minute that the federal government got access to our bank accounts, the minute they started getting access to an income tax and they could fund themselves and vote, it's not about voting Congress for its own raises. It's about the government voting to fund itself, that the money is not voluntarily put out there or that they're not taxing the states, and the states get to push back on it because we don't have the states represented in the Senate anymore. It's just funny to watch this. So I typed this into Grok this morning. Grok is the AI product that sits inside of Twitter or X. And I don't know what this means, folks who are listening in the chat and those who are listening after the fact. I'm going to describe it to you, though. I said, draw everything you know is a lie. That's the exact thing. And I'm going to show you what it generated. It generated 4 pictures, as it does. Everything you know is a lie has a picture of a black man that is very sad, an Asian, maybe Chinese man that says everything you know is a lie on the wall behind him, a book that says everything you know is a lie, and Barack Obama looking very serious. And I have no idea what the hell that means, but it's really weird. And it's funny that that's where it went. And by the way, every time that I regenerated this image, it included Asians and black people. I don't know what the hell's going on with the Grok function, but it is really funny and strange to see that. And it kind of led me down the path of sometimes you just talked about side hustles being a thing where maybe you're a politician and that's what you're known for, but you had a different thing that made your intellect develop. Donald Trump theoretically understands international business, at least at some level. He has to, because he's been able to continue to have far more money than most people. And all the left has always said, well, he lost money. And it's like, yeah, he's got more money than you. So maybe he knows a little something. This troll that's been going on, where he's focusing on something and making Americans think about things that they haven't before. I don't know what it means, but it makes me laugh. Look at this story. They're really upset right now, the left, because Donald Trump wants to annex Greenland, Canada, Mexico, and Panama. And so here's the story. Trump again suggests that the United States should own and control Greenland. He said it's an absolute necessity. I have absolutely no idea what the argument behind it is, although there are some that is going on. It's upsetting to people for the purposes of national security and freedom. This reminds me of like a Falkland Islands kind of argument. The United States feels that it should have ownership and control of Greenland. And this is getting people pissed off. And what it led me down this road is that there's all this other crazy stuff going on, guys. I want to just hit them all like wave top. So give me 1 second here. This is the stories that led from both CBS and ABC, theoretically sort of mainstream media outlets. So Trump should control Greenland. Russian aircraft, an anti-aircraft system, shot down an Azerbaijani plane. That happened over the weekend. So that's crazy. Israel is hitting Gaza and Yemen and did some airstrikes at an airfield where the WHO chief was about to go. By the way, Trump wants to pull out of the WHO as well, so that's kind of interesting. The South Koreans have a acting president who's getting impeached it's the second person to be impeached in 2 weeks, so there's all this civil unrest there. And then lastly, we've got, I guess this is the Azerbaijani plant here. There's another look at it, just saying that it doesn't look like a bird strike. It looks like the Russians actually shot them down. So we've got this new focus on a million things outside of the United States, because pretty much the entire campaign that I saw them run was all about MAGA, 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 us focused, United States centric, sort of America first, screw everyone else. But in order to accomplish that, it sounds like you've got to actually start opening your eyes up. And this little discussion about immigrants from India and the global economy, I think a lot of people that might otherwise just drive a big Ford truck and have a big MAGA bumper on the background and kind of a piss off and a Trump flag, they're having to start considering things that are out there. Like, should we annex Panama? Like my wife argued 10 years ago, should we conquer these things? Because the United States doesn't operate in a vacuum. And maybe people just don't realize that until they get hit in the face with the idea of annexing Greenland. I don't know. It's a free spinning idea of a bunch of weird shit happening all at once to me.
I want to annex Greenland so we can put the FBI headquarters there. I'm all for that. I mean, I just looked it up. The population of Greenland is 56,000 people.
Is it
That's
really?
A giant landmass. My town in Port Orange, Florida. Have you heard of Port Orange, Florida? We have 65,000 people.
Right.
Right. Like, we'd have a larger
Las Cruces,
standing
New
army
Mexico.
than Greenland.
Yeah, Las Cruces, New Mexico had 100,000 people in it, and people asked me if I was moving out of the United States when I moved there. They didn't even know it was in America. So that entire country, basically, I mean, it has no population whatsoever. It's just interesting that we're now looking at this sort of territorial expansion. I don't know this about Reagan. Did Reagan want an empire? Was that a discussion that was being had at that time in the late 70s when Reagan was coming into power, Dad? Not that I recall, no.
He probably did a movie with a dog sled team, though, and I know they have those in
Yeah, you were reading about their military spending increase. Was that because Donald Trump wants to annex them?
No, they said it was just it was ironic that Denmark upped, I think it's 1.6 billion, something like that, their defense budget, which would include more dog sled teams. because those are very effective when you're trying to cover the polar areas.
Have they not invented snow machines?
Didn't say anything about snow machines. It just said dog sleds.
There's probably more snow machines in the town you grew up in.
There are a lot.
Which is not very big, but they race them than there is in all of Greenland. And we could probably overrun them with just a bunch of people from Wisconsin who decided to just go populate Greenland.
Snowmobiles. Yeah, you don't have those in Florida either. So
Steve, you got
a lot of things you're missing out on, Steve. I'm just telling you.
Fan boats
maybe you could
and
start
alligators trump
a
dog
sled
sleds.
team competition. What do you think? In South Florida.
I made a firm commitment that I gave the last full measure of devotion for 7 years in Iowa, shoveling snow by hand, by myself, and I will never be cold again, even if that includes having to put on a shell jacket in a hotel in Houston when it's 90 degrees outside while I did an appearance on the Kyle Seraphin Show. My fingernails were blue. It was justified.
I want to talk about the last full measure of devotion. Some federal employees have decided they may be dragged back into work, kicking and screaming. We had some interesting stuff, folks, some reporting coming on this later. We're going to go a little long today. This is a fun story that I saw, and it's going to go into the disruption of life and also proving something that my father told me a long time ago about multitasking, which I want to kind of touch on as well. Jason LaCroix felt privileged to work from home. He's the father of 2 young children. We talked about kids at the beginning of this. He needed flexibility when his son, who was 6 years old, suffered a brain injury and was in intensive care. There are reasons why people might need flexible accommodations, and supporting children does seem like an important piece of it. Doesn't say anything about what the mom's story is in this, but apparently people are getting dragged back into work, and LaCroix, who was a senior systems engineer, is one of them. So this entire article is talking about returning to the office can disrupt life. The thing that people have always had to do, like go to work somewhere that was not in the house. As long as you work in an industrialized society, you have to leave the house. And they have some tips to go ahead and help you navigate the change. How did we end up here, Steve? How are people now needing coping skills to be able to go to their job?
Because when we sent everybody home, it addicted them to their devices and left them without the ability to have any sort of cognitive abilities. They're waiting for instructions on how to do everything at this point. Because you see it from the attention span that people have. The people are always on and scrolling. They can't focus on a thing. And then you get people addicted to comfort. And that's exactly what the entire thing was. I mean, this has been something I've been trying to push out there about how the government does this to people. They set up a system where they spend inordinate amounts of money to inflate the currency and import a whole bunch of people to take away jobs and leave people who are native born and they're citizens in a position where they cannot thrive in the current economy. And then they resultantly have to rely on the government's pittance. It is a recipe for the government to always expand and always have control. And this is just another cultural extension of that. People sat home and got addicted to wearing non-restrictive waistbands, and now they just can't even at the very thought of having to go back to work. So something that it's not like you're going to have to ask your dad, be like, hey, Charlie, what was it like back in the old days when they had to go to work? I mean, this is not ancient history.
No, it was like 3 years ago. Yeah, this is the other piece of the op to me. And this is why people always think it's like, oh, they're trying to sell us something. It's like, no, they gave you something you wanted. They gave you the opportunity to work from home and not even do that much work at all. A lot of people don't do any work at all from home. Some people work their asses off and some people work not at all. So that's always the case. That happens, at least in the office, there's some accountability. And now we're seeing this moment where people are quitting. They are leaving their jobs. They would rather be unemployed than have to go back and work at Apple for really, really good salaries. And this has been going on for a couple of years as people have been coming back in. Now it's hit the federal government. That thing that basically doesn't do jobs anyway. Those people are really upset. And so there's all these coping mechanisms that they have in here, which are very funny. You can ask your employer to adjust your hours so you can work when you want to, because it doesn't matter when the work is. Like
answering the phones for American citizens, you can work it at 3 a.m.
Look, the best example of this was a lady that I talked to, and I talked to a lot of people in tech, in customer service on the phone, and they're always working from home now. And sometimes I know that because they have the chirp in the background. When I have Tamika, who works for the U.S. Postal Service, and she's doing customer service. By the way, she was a really nice lady, but her fucking smoke detector in the background was chirping at me, and I couldn't focus on what I needed done. I was like, this lady is going to burn to death because she probably lives in a not very nice apartment. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that you are living in a place. And the one thing the government does, although it doesn't do very many things very well, it buys batteries and it changes smoke detectors and smoke alarms. I never heard a chirp in a government building for more than like a few minutes, because that is a full-scale rollout of everybody's capabilities. Anyway, it's just crazy to see this kind of thing and people crying about it. And maybe this is where it leads me to my multitasking. Dad, what do you say about multitasking?
It's a good excuse to do more than one thing poorly at the same time.
Okay, and we got a picture of this woman who also looks like sort of a Indian goddess, I guess. She's got all these arms, which is kind of a funny little picture. Multitasking, is it a myth? Here's what experts say about divided attention. You need to get a PhD if you want to really talk about this. This is coming from a woman named Erica Robinson. She's all too familiar with multitasking. She studied it at Apple and at Microsoft. She started studying it years and years ago, 25 years plus. And in 1998, she coined the phrase continuous partial attention, claiming there really isn't anything as such as multitasking. We never do anything simultaneously. We're just rapidly task switching. Or if I remember the way my dad used to say it back in the day before he got more polished and more statesmanlike, he used to say, it's just an excuse to do a bunch of things, poorly, or you just do everything shitty at once. She studied it, and apparently you can't do it. You can simply have like chewing gum and walking, and that's about as far as human beings can go. You can do one task and an unrelated task, a motility and like a consumption. But even when I was in basic training, they told us not to do that. I just remember every time I stand up from a table now, if I'm still chewing, like if I want to go fill up a drink or something, there's a drill sergeant in my head that's yelling at me, because you're not supposed to chew and walk. You're supposed to finish each individual task. There's probably some value in that we used to know and we've lost it. But in any case, I just think it's funny that multitasking, no one's doing it. And you're definitely not doing it at home. If you're hanging out with your kids and watching your kids, you're watching your kids. That's why you got to go to work, or you can be task saturated by the actual work. Anyway, it's all part of the op to me.
This is why people are terrible drivers, because driving on busy streets, it really does. I mean, you say, oh, it's driving, it's one activity. No, you're having to do a lot of different things at the same time. You're having to pay attention to what's in front of you, what's on the side of you, what's behind you, the speed, this traffic signals, the signs coming up. A lot is getting thrown at you, and you can just watch a average day on a semi-busy street and like how many near accidents or how many actual accidents occur. It's because it's multitasking, and people just are not equipped for it.
Yeah, we can't split our attention.
We've created, though, a situation where we develop technology to do all those things. So in the new vehicle, right, it can see ahead of you. It can see the potential danger. It can see on either side. It can see behind you. And basically, we're being programmed not to use our brain, just shut it down and let the upside down world take over and handle things.
We're gonna I'm bringing on a new sponsor pretty soon that has a lot to do with this. I'm not gonna tease it out just yet, but one of the sales pitches is exactly the opposite of what I thought the pitch would be for the product, and I think it's brilliant. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to partner up with them, and we'll just put a pin in that. If you're listening to the show and you're thinking like, okay, what in the world are you talking about? We will come back to that because I want you to know. But since you brought up technology solving problems that I didn't need solved, it turns out we've been able to drive for like 100 years, and it was fine. Like, you just need to not have a phone that has like the entire internet, and I need to not be reading an email while I'm trying to decide whether or not I can navigate the red light, which, by the way, I'm guilty of just as much as any of you are. This is a thing that I didn't know that people needed. So those of you who are single, those of us who are not, we look at you not just with pity, but with fear and skepticism and real concern, because there's a thing called online dating, and I understand that was coming online about the time when I was getting offline, and that's all great. Being able to meet a match using the internet is not a terrible thing per se. I think that there are some characteristics that are not awful. But this might be the worst thing that I've ever read, and that's saying a lot in 2024 at the end of the year here. Dating online is about to change radically. This is from CNN subscriber pieces. Those are some very feminine hands, but apparently a man's watch. So confirmed, Steve Friend. I'm going to read this to you because it scares the crap out of me for those of you that are still doing this. Personalized chatbots dating other chatbots on your behalf. Period. An AI concierge fielding questions about potential matches, advanced algorithms predicting capabilities and compatibilities better than ever before. Dating apps are on the cusp of a major transformation, essentially saying that for the last several years, dating apps have been learning who you are, whether it's the parent companies of Match.com or Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, Our Time, and more. They've been basically gathering all your data, all of your interactions, including the way that you text and you chat and you go back and forth in private messages with those that you might be dating or be interested in dating. And they are creating a virtual version of yourself that can now find the virtual version of somebody else and determine compatibility based on machine learning. This scares the ever-loving shit out of me. I don't know any other way to say it. This is how you end up with no children forever, I think. What do you think, Steve? Can you imagine that? Like, how long have you been married?
For 13 years.
Okay, 13. You got more years than me. You were dating. This was not a reality. This was like, there was no online dating, at least not in a meaningful way.
No, I've said that I felt like I got on the last helicopter out of Nam before that entire system came in. And look, I understand that you're trying to use technology to help people, right? But there's just been downstream consequences of this. And it's so obvious that this is going to go wrong. Like, the downstream consequences of the online dating in general is that men and women are very different. Shocker. And as a result of that, the pool of guys who are getting swipe right from interested women is very small. So those guys are getting the repetitions, we'll say, the opportunities to meet with women. As a result, now you've got other guys, the lion's share of guys, who are unable to meet a partner, and they're unable to actually get the skills that are necessary, the social skills, to communicate and be successful in pursuing and ultimately gaining partnership for the foreseeable future. This is now going to, even that limited pool of people, they're not going to develop those skills now at all, because you're just going to outsource it to AI to do it. And then what? Are you going to outsource the marriage? Are you going to outsource the child rearing? Everything? It's just going to be disconnected. Ultimately, it's reverse matrix. People just want to be plugged into the matrix. They can sit in their little closet with VR on their face and just get their government check, their UBI, and never have to interact with anyone at all.
I just want your open reaction to what I just read to you, Dad. Coming as a 75-year-old guy.
I guess it's virtual children. I guess that would be the next logical step, right? That the one bot would mate with another bot and create a virtual child that would grow up and go through the stages. And
a perfect Punnett square
you could
from
check
ones
in,
and zeros.
Right? You check in, you turn the screen on and watch your child develop and interact with them. And yeah, cool.
The thing that kind of freaks me out when I heard this, and I'm reading it, if you're going to have a chatbot learn your mannerisms and you're going to have some algorithmic prediction of the way that you're going to interact, which works most of the time, that's the thing about human beings. We actually operate on some pretty predictable things. Mm-hmm. But I had this fun conversation with one of my best buddies from high school. Americans have this belief, I think, like human beings that I deal with, have a belief that they are rational creatures. And a lot of their things can basically be disguised by rationality right up until the point when they do things that are completely irrational. Impulse buys, for example, a 75-inch TV without having room to put a 75-inch TV in your house. Why did you buy it? Because it looks different when you weren't in your house and you just felt like that was the thing. A chatbot's never going to make that irrational decision, but that's the thing that changes the way that your human interaction. $8 toothpaste, which I would never figure out how to do, but I will tolerate all day long because of the person that is there. Now, if you went and looked at my buying history, you'd be like, oh, that Kyle's not a guy who can tolerate an $8 toothpaste. But I can for my wife as many $8 toothpastes as she wants. And so you're what I imagine happening, and this gets to the thing we talked about the other day about war games. The only way to win is to not play. The tic-tac-toe analogy that happens. You can imagine these bots looking at people as though they're rational actors, which we know they are not because we live with people. And people are totally irrational. They believe in COVID or they don't believe in COVID, both of which have medium degrees of rationality to them and a lot of sort of just feelings and instinct. And if you're going to sit there, what they're going to eventually have your bots do is the bots are going to work out the relationship, the virtual divorce, the virtual children separation, the pet that gets split, and all the things, and then basically do the calculation, say this is not going to be worth your time. So don't ever connect. But I think that's the craziest thing about human beings is that against all odds, in all of our experiences, there are people that continue to have positive experiences, that the sum is greater than the parts, and there's no predictor of that. You have no way to know. This is going to bring me to something that has nothing to do with any of these things, but it's my take on Matt Gaetz lately. And it's something that my dad and I were chatting about last night, so I'm going to share with you, Steve. And you've met Matt. I have not. I've interacted with him a few times. there's this big push about his health access complaint, whether or not he was a scumbag and doing scumbaggery and getting involved with young girls and paying for sex and all this other kind of crazy stuff. And the left wants to run this big now that he's resigned from Congress and it basically doesn't have any power. Same way they're running after Elon and Vivek. And my instinct is maybe some of those things may have been true about him. But if you look at Steve Friend, the unmarried guy, and you look at Steve Friend, the father of 2 boys who's out in the world, those are not the same man. And I am not the same person that I was before. And I imagine my dad, Charlie, is not the same man that he was before he was a parent, and certainly not the same guy that he is as a grandparent. And so there's no way to account. There's no chat bot in the world that can estimate how another human being in some of these experiences will make you a fundamentally different person. Matt Gaetz doesn't even look like the same guy. He lost weight. He sounds different. He acts differently because you become protective as a man when you have a female that's under your charge that you have to go out and look for. So we all end up differently, and there's no way you could do that. But what you could do is eliminate possibilities there. And again, that to me looks like the op. It's like, how do we keep people from being able to connect and making themselves better? Because that's, human beings tend to make each other better. And I know our chat is a great example of that, because there's people in there that have become more than the sum of just people who watch a podcast together with us. Anyway, that's my encouragement for humanity. You know, going back into the office is not a bad thing. Going and dating in real life is probably not a bad thing. And get rid of this crap. So that's why this new product we're going to be bringing on in a little bit, in a couple of days, I think will be interesting. And it's not going to be for the reasons that people think. Any thoughts on those things?
I think you should put your phone in a drawer for at least an hour, preferably a longer period, 2 or 3 hours every day, and separate from the virtual world. Because if you are constantly attached to the virtual world, you lose that human connection. You miss so much by looking at the screen of the things that are happening around you in nature. And I'm totally serious, and it's really hard. There are very few people who probably can do it, but think about it. It's not that tough. Put your phone in a drawer and go outside, go for a walk, have a conversation, do something. Even if you just, about the only time we tend to do that in today's world is when we're watching a movie or some other video presentation. But turn off all the electronics for a short period of time and see if you can get to a longer period of time, and try to, what a miracle if you could go for a whole day and not be connected to the virtual world. And if we don't start, it's going the other way, because there are people, how many people have their phones by their nightstand, and they wake up in the middle of the night and they got to check, did I get an email? Did I get a text? What's going on? What's the latest? And that's the beginning of the end from an old guy. We didn't have that. And was the world better off? I think so. Were there better relationships? Did we make mistakes? Sure. Did we screw up? Did we have all kinds of problems? Yeah, we've always had problems, but not like what you're seeing. That disconnectedness is a direct result of the relationship we have with technology. And I'm not anti-technology. It's a great tool, but it's become an addiction and not a tool.
Steve?
Yeah, I would never ask my kids to do something that I was unwilling to do myself. And look, we put Christmas presents out under the tree, and we told the kids, you can't open those presents right now. I mean, it's the exact same proposition as you can't look at your phone right now. And now, as Charlie suggested, do it for an hour. We had our kids not open their presents for like multiple days. So I think you can make that sacrifice. And I mean, even just back to Matt Gaetz, this is not an argument for people not to be held accountable for any sort of like serious wrongdoing. But one of the best scientifically, as long as we're talking about the science at this point, factoids that's out there is that the slowest cells to regenerate in your body are actually your bones, the cells of your bones. And it takes 7 years. So every 7 years, your skeleton is completely different than it was before. So you're a new person every 7 years, essentially, which makes marriage interesting, which makes the premise of even going back to work interesting. Hey, look, you're basically over halfway to being a completely different person at this point. There's going to be an adjustment period to going back to work, but you just make that adjustment, and hopefully you've improved yourself in the intervening time, and you're going to go back and have the opportunity to be the better worker, the best worker that you've ever been, and you should benefit from that. This is an opportunity. This isn't something to look down on and say like, oh, this is going to be a disruption to my life. This is an opportunity to maybe have a better life entirely, and people should be open to that proposition.
What do you got coming up on American Radicals tomorrow?
The finale of our 3-part series we're doing tomorrow on AMRAD. Rumble.com/AMRADPod is where you can go. 10:30, the finale we're covering all the news stories, the big bombshells for 2024. So we're going to be looking at September, October, November, December. Should be a lot of stuff, particularly around politics, because that was when there was an actual election. So we're going to have fun with that. Encourage everyone to join us. That's, again, at rumble.com/AMRADPod.
Dad, you're going to be heading home, so I wanted to make sure you got on the program in person, in studio, live with me and Steve. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Thank you for being Steve Friend and a wonderful inspiration to all those who watch Friendly Fridays, me included.
There you go.
Great.
It's like having a real live representative from our chat, because my dad is active in there every morning, which is comedy to me as well. You talk about a digital interaction. I get to see that. All right, gentlemen, we're going to shut it down here. So let me switch over here, folks. Thanks so much for watching. I did not do this without a palate cleanse. You know that I wouldn't leave you hanging on that. I have something just to make you all kind of remember we need each other, and women, it's the end of the year. Consider this as you reframe the way that you talk to your husbands. For any of you that are complaining about mansplaining, and you know who you are that listen and comment regularly, consider what would it be if it was the other way around. Here is a little song about mansplaining from the guy's perspective.
I just read the definition of mansplaining, and it sounds a lot like how my wife explains things. A condescending tone of something that is obvious, but I guess it's only patronizing if you got a dick. Cause I can't remember when a time my intelligence wasn't insulted by the results of a comment that she said, like how to crack an egg or how to put my son to bed. 5 nephews, 5 nieces telling me make sure you hold his head. But if I tell you to be careful when parking the car, not to scratch the rims, everybody's like, here we go again. Now it's all toxic and masculine. She's not bossy, she's confident. You're a monster and you're arrogant. You apologize when you go to bed. That's some classic gaslighting. Yeah, that's that patriarchy at work. Which one's doing the other one worse? Which one's getting embarrassed in TikToks? Being laughed at for wearing the same shirt? Yeah, happy wife, happy life. But happy husband, I guess something ain't right.
Happy husbands, happy wives. That's what makes it go around. All right, y'all. Get off the internet. Get off your social media. Get off your phones. Go out there and do something, even if it's crappy outside. Spend some time with family for these last couple days of the year. We'll see you again on Monday. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. God bless you. Go to church. Go meet some real human beings. If you're out there in the dating world and you're thinking, hey, where are the good people at? They're probably attending Mass on Sunday, and they're looking around saying, who's not holding anybody else's hand? Who's standing there in the pews all alone? Might be a good opportunity. Way better than a chatbot. It's the original connection. All right. God bless all of you. We'll see you all soon. Have a good weekend.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.